I like working alone, but this was one of those days when I wish someone had come along. I'm a home inspector for a company that deals with land acquisition and evaluation in the dying rural communities of my state. Thrilling job title, I know. Basically, when the old folks that live out in the country kick the bucket, their kids who already moved closer to the city decades ago usually decide to sell off their parents' property. Since nobody else wants to live out there either, the land almost always gets bought up by a corporate entity. For better or worse, that's where contractors like me come in. Somebody has to go out there and shut off the utilities, test the soil for arability, and inspect the house to see if it's worth fixing up, or if it's cheaper to turn the whole plot into farmland. However, there are mysteries in some of these places that make me think it might be better if nobody lives there anymore. One day, I got sent out to what I thought would be a typical home inspection. The utility, soil, and survey guys had already been out, so all that was left to check was the condition of the house itself. After an hour-long drive, I arrived at the isolated house around noon. It was a typical setup, an old double-wide trailer home with a lifetime of extensions and add-ons trying to polish that affordable lower-class core. According to my supervisor, the story was that 3 months ago, the husband died first from a stroke. Then the wife died of a broken heart shortly after. The family had come out just once or twice to collect the heirlooms and whatnot, but left everything else for the corporate buyer to dispose of. Too painful to sort through it all, I guess. With a sigh, I put away my thoughts of grieving strangers and stepped out of the truck to do my job. As I walked up the driveway, I noticed there was a small fenced-in field with a rundown shed, something for me to inspect later. As always, I circled the house first before going inside. There was some damage, but the house was in good shape for its age. The only thing that struck me as odd was that the flowers around the house looked pristine and healthy. Not like they'd been left to grow wild for 3 months. It didn't really matter though. After I checked all the exterior boxes, I climbed up the porch and tried to open the front door. It was supposed to be unlocked by the previous contractor, but it wouldn't budge. Thankfully, I had a key. Otherwise, I would have driven all the way out there for nothing. Although, that might have been for the best. Stepping inside, I saw something I'll never quite forget. I'd walked into plenty of scenes similar to it in all my years of inspecting abandoned houses, but this one took the cake. Entering the living room, I saw an old, well-worn recliner. It was empty, but laid all the way back, and there was a deep brown stain in the shape of a person still laying in it. That old man died in the house for sure. People often leave a stain of urine or fecal matter as their body relaxes in death, but this wasn't that. This was full-body decomposition. Something about the story my supervisor told me wasn't adding up. The chair belonged to the husband. They were labeled Grandma and Grandpa by knitted covers thrown over the backs, but that meant the woman must have let her husband rot in the chair he died in for days before calling anyone. That's a little more than a broken heart. More like a broken mind, too. I shuddered, trying to refocus. Never mind the unlit candles arranged in a circle around the chair, with dried beads of wax dripping onto the floor beneath them. Just get to work, inspect the house, and get out. Yet everywhere I went, this empty house was still breathing. Dirty dishes in the sink, clothes half folded on the bed, water still puddled in the bathtub. It's hard to focus on the condition of door jambs and drywall when it feels like a ghost is breathing down your neck. However, it was in the master bathroom that I discovered the worst part of the house. From a home inspector's perspective anyway. On the floor by the toilet, where the heat vent should have been, was an 18-inch hole punched out by wood rot. It led straight down into the crawl space. There was no way I was squeezing through that hole, but I still had to confirm what created it, which meant I had an excuse to finally leave the house, only to crawl underneath it from the outside. So I went out and circled the house, looking for the crawl space cover that would give me the least trouble. I found one on the side facing the field and shed I saw earlier, but it looked a little too easy to get into. I had checked it just a few minutes ago and it had looked completely in place, but now it was crooked. I crouched down, took it the rest of the way off, then shined my flashlight into the crawl space. Like any other, it was full of spider webs, carcinogenic insulation, and all manner of other nasty things waiting for me to crawl on top of them. I steeled myself to get on my stomach and enter, but then at the last second, I got the urge to look over my shoulder. Call it instinct, divine intervention, or whatever, but it made me notice something. The shrubs against the fence had been parted in the wind, just barely revealing a gap where a gate had once been. I knew I was probably just procrastinating, but I decided I would go check out that shed, then come back to the crawl space. When I got to the shed, though, I realized what had been bothering me, and it wasn't superstitions about the dead husband. There was a bedroll on top of a bale of hay, looking like it was recently disturbed. Empty cans of food, just like the ones from the kitchen, were scattered around the interior. There were no squatters listed on the paperwork I got, but this was evidence to the contrary. They hadn't just hidden from us either. A small corkboard was poking out from under the bedroll. Out of involuntary curiosity, I pulled it out and looked at it, finding random scraps of paper with scribblings of countless observations, from animal activity to cars. One slip had a list of vehicles and tag numbers, with dates next to them. Recent dates, familiar vehicles, white van, white truck, license plate number. Me. It was a list of all the contractors that had come out before me. And my truck was at the bottom, the most recent arrival. Moving quickly, I ripped the list off the board and crumpled it into my hand, immediately leaving the shed and rushing back to my truck. Once I locked myself inside, I tried to call my supervisor to tell them what was going on, but I couldn't get a signal. Erring on the side of caution, I left the property with the job unfinished. Nothing I saw indicated with certainty that whoever was squatting there was hostile, necessarily. But I knew something was wrong. That kind of compulsive observation screams it. Luckily, my supervisor wasn't too hard on me. Apparently, all the other guys who had to go inside the house were spooked by the death stain, too. But nobody spent as much time in there as I did. He said he'd send the new guy to bite the bullet and finish my work just this once. Only problem is, the kid never came back from that job. He made it there, but straight up ditched. No call, no text. He just quit. His family said he was alive, but nobody could get a hold of him to find out what spooked him even worse than me. My guess is he actually went into the crawl space I was too scared to enter. There must have been something in there worse than anyone's imagination. Why else would that squatter be watching an abandoned house so closely? We reported the property to the police, but of course they didn't find anything. To this day, nobody quite knows what the hell was going on there. It could have been a family member struggling to let go, a random drifter, or perhaps the wife never died of a broken heart at all. I just hope that by now, the whole place has been bulldozed. Four years ago, I moved out of my parents' house and got settled into a nightmare. At first, everything was perfect. I had taken a gap year and was ready to get my life together. I enrolled in an online school and got a part-time job at a supermarket. Then my dad helped me rent a one-bedroom condo by co-signing the lease. Just like that, I was living on my own. I thought it was a good start, though I felt out of place. I suddenly had way more neighbors than before, but I didn't feel like one of them. I was too young, overprivileged, didn't know anybody. And hell, I had never even met my landlord. The lease was all through some agency, and my dad did all the dealing for me. For weeks, I only went outside for necessities. I felt like a recluse, perched by the windows with my cat, peering through the blinds at my neighbors, wishing I knew how to start a conversation with them. I never figured that out, but I noticed one person who seemed to always be around no matter what time of day. It was an older white guy, probably in his 50s. He drove a tan mid-2000s SUV. Clearly he lived there, probably in the stack across the street. It didn't seem like he worked or did much, but I tried not to judge. About a month in, my opinion changed. I kept seeing him in the parking lot outside my work too. It was a nearby grocery store, so he could have easily just been shopping there. But my schedule was very irregular. I worked the same 8-hour shift 3 days in a row each week. That man was always outside the store as I got off, every single time. The question I kept thinking was, who goes grocery shopping 3 days in a row? And why always 3 p.m.? Even worse, what made me dread seeing his car was when I realized I never saw him in the store. He was always sitting in his car, smoking cigarettes with the windows cracked. When I looked outside my window at home, I'd see him. When I looked outside the door at work, I saw him there too. I had to be overthinking this. I was just being paranoid because I'd been isolating myself. To fix my brain, I started going out to random coffee shops to study instead of studying exclusively at home. That remedy might have worked had the man in the tan SUV not started showing up in those parking lots too. I could never catch him following me when I was going somewhere or when I arrived, but every time I went to leave, I'd see that SUV. He was never parked right next to my car, though always backed in and pointed vaguely toward it. That man was usually in the SUV, smoking with the windows cracked just like he did at my job, but he never made eye contact with me, not even accidentally. It felt intentional. Neighbors who keep running into each other eventually make eye contact, even if it's just for a split second. It's just human. This guy was not. Unsure what else to do, I started taking pictures of his car whenever I saw it. But I ran into problems there too. My phone camera couldn't zoom in well, and since the guy always backed in, I couldn't get his plate. His grimy windshield and smoke-filled interior made any shots I ever got of his face terrible too. Still, I quickly amassed an album of evidence. I showed my dad, and he was concerned, but not in the way I wanted him to be. He thought I was being too paranoid, convincing myself that someone was following me, when they were just my neighbor and went to similar places. I couldn't convince him it was deeper than that, but he told me if I was truly concerned, I should call the police and file a report. The cops were much more direct about calling me hysterical. That was crushing to my mental state. I almost started believing them. Then one day, an old friend reached out. She had moved to the beach, about a 40-minute drive away, and adopted a stray cat who turned out to be very pregnant. She was asking everyone she knew to take a kitten, and I was in the exact mental state to not be able to resist. The unplanned trip out of town was enough, but having a new kitten to take my mind off things felt like just what I needed. I didn't hesitate. I drove to the beach that night. At her house, I was so engrossed in the new kitten that I had forgotten about what was happening at home. But as I was loading the carrier into my car, I noticed it. I smelled it first. The foul secondhand smoke emanating nearby. The tan SUV and the old creep inside it. He had followed me all the way to the beach. In that moment, I chose to ignore it, knowing my friend would probably just call me crazy too. But internally, I was panicking. When I returned home, it just got worse. I was trying not to think about it. I had to get my cats introduced to each other somehow, then figure out if there was anything I could do about him. Turns out, he moved first. About an hour after I got home, someone knocked on the door. I froze, terrified, not moving for at least a full minute. They didn't knock again. Hoping they were gone, I crept up to peek outside, but there was no need. Whoever was out there, they had slid a note under the door and left. As soon as I picked up the envelope, I smelled that cancer again. The paper was soaked in cigarette smoke. It had to be from the man in the tan SUV. The odor was the same as the one I'd come to recognize as his. Unfortunately, that was far from the worst part. It had to be from the man in the tan SUV. The note was handwritten. It said, "One pet per unit policy. Get rid of it." He knew I brought a second cat in, but what did he care? Then I looked at the signature he left. Under his name he wrote, "Your landlord, No. If he was my neighbor and my landlord, that meant he had a spare key to my door. This whole time, he could have entered my home whenever he pleased. I couldn't believe it. I had to pull up the digital copy of my lease to prove it. But sure enough, the name and signature matched. I had been paying that man rent so he could pay his bills while he stalked me full time. With this information, there was nothing I could do. I had to give the kitten back, as I was afraid of what he might do if I disobeyed him, or broke my lease to try and move somewhere else. He hadn't done anything yet, but that just meant I had nothing to use against him. And of course, he could change that fact whenever he wanted. It might sound crazy, but I lived like this for another 9 months, until my lease finally ended. I searched the condo for him every time I entered, to see if he was waiting for me, and I jammed the front door with chairs and rugs to keep him out when I was home. I was worried he would follow me to my next place, but for whatever reason, he didn't. I didn't understand why until recently. It's been 3 years since I moved out. I still look over my shoulder whenever I smell smoke because of him, but otherwise I've forgotten about it. By chance, I happened to be near my old condo complex. On a whim, I decided to drive by my old place. There it was, and judging by the stickers on the car parked out front, occupied by another young woman. And then there he was, standing across the street, passively watching. Except this time, he finally looked directly at me. As I drove by, we made eye contact. I know for a fact he recognized me. Now I get it. I was never special. It was just his tenant. The temporary fixation. He wanted me to know that he was always there. That he always could do something. People like that eventually do whatever it is they're thinking about. But I made it out in time. I just hope the poor girl currently living there realizes how much danger she's in. The worst place I ever lived was in Tallahassee, Florida. I moved there to be near my girlfriend, who was going to FSU, which turned out to be the dumbest decision of my life. I struggled to find an apartment I could afford, and ended up on the outskirts of town, renting a roach-infested 2-bedroom townhome in the hopes of finding a roommate to move in and split the rent with me. Obviously, that never happened. The list of things that sucked about that apartment is long, but there was one part of it that I avoided completely. The back porch. I thought it would be a cool place to hang, but upon trying that the first time, I realized the damn thing was crawling with spiders. Screw that. Aside from the porch, also at the back of the first floor, was the tiny kitchen and laundry room. For whatever reason, the laundry room had a door separating it from the kitchen, as well as its own door leading outside to the back porch. So I had 2 different ways to access a space I didn't want to touch with a 10-foot pole. Great. On another note, the washer and dryer didn't work, and the landlord refused to repair them, so I washed all my clothes at the laundromat down the road, and used the laundry room as extra pantry space. If all this wasn't bad enough, the neighborhood was home to a thriving community of other pest animals. Something was always digging through the garbage bins and scratching at the exterior walls, trying to take shelter. The sounds were more frequent after dark, and there seemed to be a preference for the back of the building. One day I got the nerve to go out on the back porch to see if I had something nesting underneath it. The building was on a grade, so while the front door was at ground level, the back porch was about 3 feet up off the ground. The crawl space underneath seemed to extend below the building as well, but I had no clue how far it went. When I looked at the other 2 units connected to mine, I saw that the underside of their porches were boarded up with plywood. It looked like shit, but it must have worked, because my crawl space was wide open, and something was living under there for sure. There was a patch of loose dirt by the steps where the grass had been killed by something repeatedly crawling in and out. I had no interest in doing a thorough investigation though. I just took a page out of my neighbor's book and decided to board it up. That afternoon, I went to the store, bought some trellis panels, then took a hammer and some nails and covered up every entrance into the crawl space via the back porch. It wouldn't stop rats or mice, but it looked a whole lot better than plywood, and it would repel the larger critters I suspected were the problem. However, the next morning, I discovered the animals were both bigger and smarter than I anticipated. I'd heard the usual scratching and scraping through the night, but nothing prepared me for what I walked out to. Something had entirely ripped one of the trellis panels off the porch, then smashed it to bits. That wasn't all either. After I picked up the pieces, I noticed damage to the secondary back door leading into the laundry room. There were scratch marks all over the lower half. I couldn't tell what made it, but it seemed related. Whatever was living under my porch, it had tried to get into my apartment. With that in mind, I decided to give up and just let them have the porch. Besides, I had other problems. I still couldn't find a roommate, so I was bleeding money for this shithole. And on top of that, my girlfriend and I were on the brink of breaking up. The whole reason I was suffering through living there was to be with her. But we barely spent any time together anymore. I felt like it was because the filth and squalor of my apartment was rubbing off on me. Around this time, with everything that was going on, I started drinking. A lot. I couldn't afford to go out most nights, so I would just buy bottles of bottom shelf vodka and drink myself to sleep every night after work. At some point, it got so bad I would black out halfway through the bottle, then wake up on the floor with the bottle completely empty and my entire apartment in a wreck. On a regular basis, I would find mysterious trash and broken glass everywhere. Roaches crawling in the clothes I left on the floor because I randomly decided to strip naked while blacked out, and the exterior door in the laundry room unlocked. I was always too hungover to care much about why any of this was happening. I just tried my best to reset, clean up, and lock the door again. My best guess was, since I always avoided the back porch while sober, that drunk me made it a point to hang out there. This was my life for several months leading into the winter. Nobody wanted to hang out with the drunken asshole I'd become, and my girlfriend broke up with me, though I don't even remember that happening. I just know it happened at some point. One day, I drank myself broke. I had no money and no liquor, so I was having an involuntary dry night. Faced with the stark reality of my life, I was paralyzed. I lied in bed and stared at the ceiling for hours. Sometime around 3 a.m., I realized there was no use trying to sleep anymore, and I was starving, so I went downstairs to the kitchen. Nothing in the fridge or any of the cabinets was appealing to me. The last place I could look was the laundry room, which I stored some non-perishables in. When I opened the door and turned on the light, I saw a person sleeping on top of the washer and dryer. It was a homeless woman. She was using pillows and blankets of mine that went missing forever ago. I was in complete and utter shock, but it got worse. Under the bright lights, the woman woke up. She squirmed under the blankets and turned over, then looked at me. And with a slightly confused look on her face, but in an otherwise calm voice, she said, "Oh hey, you're up." I slammed the door in her face. I'd never seen her before in my life. Why was she talking to me like she knew me? And why the hell was she sleeping in my laundry room? Freaked the hell out, I grabbed my phone and my keys and locked myself inside my car. Then I called the police. It was so late and they clearly didn't care about the neighborhood. It was so late and they clearly didn't care about the neighborhood, so it took them forever to arrive. By then, the woman was gone. I asked the cop to look under the porch, but he simply shined his flashlight and found nothing, telling me he was not going to crawl in there either. That left me with only one option: leave, skip town, smoke bomb the whole city, break my lease, and go back home to my parents with my tail between my legs. I wasn't prepared to deal with this. The way that woman spoke to me made me connect a lot of details about the shit I constantly woke up to after blacking out. I think I had caught her before, but while so belligerent that I didn't chase her out. I was so lonely and wasted that I think I hung out with her. I have no idea the extent to which we interacted, but I hope she was just sneaking around me when she knew I was blind drunk, just whenever she needed to get out of the cold. I hope I didn't, you know. It's been a couple years since then, though I think about this time a lot. I was in a deep hole. My level of carelessness could have gotten me seriously hurt. It's taken a lot of work to claw my way up to where I am now. But I always wonder, what would have become of me if I stayed there? The cops wouldn't have helped me. My friends and girlfriend had every right to abandon me. That whole time I was looking for a roommate. I was too drunk to realize I already had one. She must have been living under my porch from the start. And through me, she found a way inside. Had I stuck around much longer, I think I would have become like her.